Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again. Today I'm going to show you how I like to make a couple of my favorite homemade condiments. This is going to be a homemade mayonnaise and a homemade ranch dressing. Um, Now I'm going to show you how to make these a little bit different than the traditional way. It's going to be an eggless recipe. It's going to be vegan. Um, and because it's eggless, it's a little less perishable than regular mayonnaise, and I don't have the same worry I have about homemade mayonnaise with raw egg. Instead of egg, to emulsify the oil, which is basically foaming the oil and helping add something to the oil to help it foam, I'm going to use what's called aquafaba, and that's this stuff here. And it's basically the water left over from a can of beans, in this case chickpeas. Any kind of white bean works pretty well. You can use dark beans too, but they'll color the final product some. Chickpeas work good because the flavor is pretty mild and doesn't flavor the water a whole lot. Basically, just when I opened a can of chickpeas, I poured the water out. I just freeze it whenever I use a can of beans. I pour that into a baggie and throw it in the freezer, and then I pull it out and use it in all sorts of different things as a replacement for eggs. For mayonnaise, it's basically just frothed oil, and you need something to emulsify it, which in this case is the aquafaba, and then something to season it, which for regular mayonnaise is basically just mustard and a little bit of salt and a little bit of vinegar. I'm going to use a little bit of cream of tartar too, which will give it a little bit more tartness and kind of helps a little bit as an emulsifier too. Then to add onto that for the ranch dressing, I'm going to use some garlic powder, some onion powder. That's what this is here. So I'm also going to have some dried herbs. I'm going to add in the dried dill, dried sage, and some dried thyme. We use a little bit of smoked paprika. Um, then this isn't very traditional, but I'm going to use a little bit of what's called sumac. It's a Middle Eastern spice that's kind of got a lemony, like citrusy flavor that has a bit of tartness to it. And then this is hing or asafoetida. It's kind of an Indian Asian spice, but it has kind of a pungent flavor that's similar to like onions and garlic and stuff. And then I've got a little bit of tamarind paste here, and I'm just going to use a tiny little bit of that, but it'll add a little bit more of that kind of tang. So I've got two containers. This is just going to be my mayonnaise here, and this is going to be my ranch dressing. So the first couple things are the same. I'm going to do a half a teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to do a teaspoon and a half of mustard powder. This is a half teaspoon scoop, so I'm going to do 3. And this is basically just ground up yellow mustard seed that I made myself. I use this just yellow mustard seed and through my spice grinder, and then I just keep this as a little bit of powder to use. You can buy mustard powder too, but this is a little bit fresher, has a lot more of that mustard flavor to it. And then I'm going to do half a teaspoon of cream of tartar in each. Alrighty, so I'm going to kind of blend the spices into that with the blender a little bit. I just kind of mix things up. Then last thing I forgot to mention is a little squirt of regular kind of whole seed Dijon type mustard is last thing you want. Maybe like a teaspoon or so of that. Doesn't have to be real precise. So I'm going to do the regular mayo first. The thing with mayo is you want to use a fairly bland type oil. The flavor will go into it quite a bit. So olive oil can work, but it'll give it a fairly distinct olive type flavor, which you may or may not want. If I'm making an aioli, olive oil is really good, but for regular mayo, I like to use more of a straight canola oil. For the ranch dressing, I am going to use the olive oil, but I'm going to use half that, and I'm going to use half of an avocado oil. Because it has a stronger flavor, those two oils have a stronger flavor too, and they'll kind of accent those other flavors. But the regular mayo has more of a kind of mild flavor, and it can get overpowered by a strong olive oil flavor. So I'm going to leave that out. Before I start adding in the oil to emulsify, I'm going to add a little bit of vinegar. This is a rice wine vinegar. Usually I'd use a white wine vinegar. So you just want about a tablespoon of this. Doesn't have to be real precise again, but you don't want to water down the stuff too much. All right, so as you start to do your emulsification, you just want to kind of drizzle the oil in as you run the blender, and it'll start to thicken up and solidify. And then as it builds up, you want to just kind of lift the blender up with it as it builds. So when it gets to a certain density of oil, you'll see it start to solidify. It takes a certain amount to get to the right ratio of oil to the aquafaba and vinegar and stuff. But once it gets to that, it'll start to thicken up and solidify. But it's still kind of runny now because there's not enough oil. So I'm going to keep drizzling the oil in. I like to thicken that part up and blend it as much as I can. And then I'll start to re-thicken it with a little more oil from that point up. You want to just drizzle it in slowly. Too much at once can kind of overwhelm it and make it hard to emulsify. But if you just drizzle it in, it'll incorporate it and then not break. Yeah, it's thickened up nicely now. Pretty much when you get to the right volume of oil to the amount of emulsifier you have, it'll become solid, and more oil you add won't really want to incorporate very easily. And that's pretty much the point. You just want to stop. So yeah, you can see this is all nice and solidified now. Once it chills in the fridge, it'll firm up even more too. So just kind of put it into a mason jar or something where you can keep it covered, and it'll last for a couple of months in the fridge. Like I said, because there's no egg in it, it's actually quite a bit more stable and less perishable than regular mayo is, and the flavor is just amazing. I'm going to use this on sandwiches for all next week, and then I'll probably use some in a few days to make some pasta salad as well. Pasta salad and potato salad are probably my two favorite things to use this with. So my ranch dressing is going to get made in the exact same way as the mayo, but the spices are going to be different. So we start with a little bit of fresh black pepper. Want it fairly finely ground. I already added the mustard and the cream of tartar, so I'm not going to worry about those. I'm going to add just like a pinch, like less than a quarter teaspoon probably, of that hing asafoetida. I'm going to add my onion powder. I'm going to add a good heaping teaspoon of garlic powder. I'm going to add some sage. Just like a pinch of sage. You want quite a bit of dill. Like I like to use pretty much like a palm full of dill. Probably like that, maybe like a good tablespoon. Then I'm going to use just like a pinch of thyme, a pinch of the sumac, that's that lemony spice that I talked about, just a dash of that smoked paprika, and the tamarind I really do just only want a tiny little bit of, so I'm just going to dip my spoon in it, get a little bit on the tip of it, and let it drip in there a couple of times. The tamarind can be pretty overpowering, so you don't want too much of it. Alright, so that's what I'm going to do for seasoning. I'm going to kind of blend that in. I like to get it all blended together well with the liquid. That way it mixes in with the oils evenly. I'm going to add another tablespoon or so of the wine vinegar. So I'm going to start my emulsification now. I'm going to start off with the avocado oil. And same kind of thing, you just want to drizzle it in until it starts to thicken up, and then I'll stop drizzling it until that part gets pretty thick and solid, and then I'll add in some more olive oil. So that's definitely thickening up, but it's still kind of liquidy, so you need more oil. I'm going to fill it out the rest of the way with olive oil. kind of see how I can use the immersion blender to go up and down with it and incorporate that oil that's on top. Get a little bit more oil. Alright, so that's pretty much there. And that's nice and solid, just like the mayo was. You could use this now like a really good aioli where it's pretty thick. And as a dipping sauce, it's really good. As a dressing, I would like to thin it out a little bit more. So depending on how you're going to use it, as a salad dressing, I'd probably add a little bit of milk to thin it out a little. Maybe a little almond milk if I was going to keep it vegan. If I was going to use it as a dipping sauce or as like on a sandwich or something, then I might just leave it more thick like the mayo. In this case, I'm going to leave it a little thick, so I kind of have the ability to choose what I want to do with it as I use it. I might thin out a portion of it and then leave a portion of it thicker. Alright, so there we have it. Homemade ranch dressing and homemade mayonnaise. Both eggless and vegan and super delicious. One thing, the ranch definitely does benefit from sitting in the fridge overnight to kind of chill and let the flavors blend a little bit. Tastes really good right now, but once all the herbs kind of sit overnight, the flavor will soak in and it'll be way better. So yeah, I'm going to put these in my fridge and then tomorrow I'm going to make some stuff with them. Yep, so there we have it. Thanks for joining me again.